Welcome back in. Extra Point, Tyler Head with you here on The Game. I want to remind you that the craft beer card is back. You can spend $30 a brewery at 12 craft beer locations. It's $360 value, all yours for only $79. Go online to 1075thegame.com and click on the Sweet Deals tab to purchase the craft beer card. Of course, Monday night we wrapped up the college basketball season with UConn claiming another national championship, back-to-back ones there for Dan Hurley and company. But going into the game and coming away from it, the headline's not really about what's going on with UConn, so much focused on Coach Calipari and what's going on with the University of Kentucky as the news started to trickle out on Sunday night about him moving on to the University of Arkansas, which I think that's very fitting of Coach Calipari to dominate the headlines for a national championship game that he is not even competing in. And yesterday we had the first, I guess, public appearance of Coach Calipari since this news started to break, with him out walking his dog in the Lexington area, looking like something out of a Curb Your Enthusiasm episode more than anything else. And he had no comments to offer, while out in public, but he eventually made his way to Twitter later on in the day and put out a pretty lengthy video, about 3.5, 4 minutes long, kind of issuing his thoughts and kind of saying farewell and I guess apologizing to the University of Kentucky's fan base in totality over the course of a couple of minutes. And I'm not going to play the entire thing for you here, but I do want to play about a minute clip that I think kind of encapsulates the overall message of what Coach Cal was, was trying to say with this. Here it is, about a minute of Coach Cal's goodbye letter to Big Blue Nation yesterday.
The last few weeks, we've come to realize that this program probably needs to hear another voice, that the university as a whole has to have another voice giving guidance about this program that they hear. And the fans need to hear another voice. We've loved it here, but we think it's time for us to step away and step away completely from the program. There have been opportunities that have been presented to us, and we're discussing them as a family. I love coaching. I love coaching young people. I love this year's team. I loved every day walking in. They've invigorated me. I love the chase for championships. I love bringing the kids together. It's what I do. It's who I am.
Sometimes I wish coaches would just be kind of brutally honest with us. If there was any coach that does not need to, I guess, apologize for departing a school, it's probably going to be Coach Cal, because the dynamic of this relationship that he has with the university in these past couple of years with the fan base is so unique, where I think both sides are walking away pretty satisfied here. Now, again, when you go back to a couple weeks ago, after Kentucky got eliminated once again in the first two rounds of the NCAA tournament, this year happened to be in the first round against Oakland, there's a lot of questions on if Kentucky was going to retain him as their head coach. Now, again, he has a notable $33 million buyout that would slow down a lot of schools from wanting to make that move. But again, this is Kentucky, and basketball matters more than anything else. And if they don't think he can get the job done, they would do what they can to maybe move on from him. But all indications seem to be that he was going to come back for another season at Kentucky. Well, then a couple weeks later, Arkansas, who just lost Eric Musselman to the University of Southern California, seemingly is throwing all this money at him. Now his deal with Arkansas has not been finalized. They're still in the final, talks of that negotiation, but it's expected to be somewhere in the neighborhood of about $8 million. But he's also going to get a very lucrative seeming NIL budget to be able to work with to bring in a lot of top talent out there in Arkansas. So, this relationship's been rocky for a while. because, again, he's not won a national championship in 12 years, has not made any kind of deep run in the NCAA tournament since COVID. And that's not the standard of what you expect out there with Big Blue Nation in Lexington. So the fans have been chanting for a change for a long time. And Coach Cal, again, seeing a life raft seemingly in Arkansas, throwing a boatload of money at him to be able to come out there where the expectations are going to be high, but not quite as lofty as what you have up there in Lexington. I don't see why they wouldn't do that. And reading the reports from Matt Norlander of CBS, it seems that after Arkansas reached out to him about, potentially coming over there, he did meet with some Kentucky officials, and they were like, "Hey, yeah, go. We can't come to an agreement to retain you. Go ahead and go." And I think they were just as thrilled as he was to see this relationship come to an end because, hey, guess what? They don't have to pay that $33 million buyout and then go out and seemingly go get the coach that they want, or a coach to replace Calipari that they think is going to be able to lead them to the success that you would expect out of Kentucky basketball. Now that brings us to an interesting point, I feel like, because the standard that Kentucky basketball is going to be looking for in their next head coach may not necessarily fit what they're going to be able to bring in. When Coach Cal decides to leave Kentucky and go to Arkansas, that turns the eyes to a lot of notable coaches around the country. Dan Hurley, who just won the national championship, who kind of laughed off the thought of him going to Kentucky. Nate Oates, who just took Alabama to the Final Four, put out a statement yesterday that said, hey, guess what? I'm not going anywhere. A lot of coaches are going to use this as leverage to get better contracts and better deals at their respective schools because Kentucky's going to throw a lot of money at whoever they end up bringing in. And there's a lot of coaches on the list that are going to be going after trying to get as their next head basketball coach. The name that seems to be at the top of the list based on the reporting out of Lexington is Scott Drew, who's been at Baylor for pretty much 2 decades now and has built that into a pretty respectable program in college basketball. Just won the national championship a couple seasons ago, and it seems that is who Kentucky is zeroing in on. If I'm Scott Drew, I wouldn't do it. To be honest with you, I got a good gig out there in Waco. I've literally built this program from nothing into a national powerhouse in one of the toughest conferences in all of college basketball on a year in, year out basis. A perennial tournament team that's destined to make a deep run more often than not. And again, won a national championship a couple years ago. And that national championship, by the way, after having been there for 17, 18 years before getting it, that buys you good graces for a long time. He can sit at Baylor and coach for as long as he wants to, and nobody's going to run him off because they have that national championship. You go to Kentucky and you win a national championship in year number 3, well, you go another 4 or 5 years without one or without making a Final Four, people are going to look at you with their hands up in the air like, what the heck, man? Only one national championship in 8 years? That's unacceptable. The standard and the expectations of that fan base and that program are so lofty. If I'm Scott Drew, I'm using this as an opportunity to get more money out of Baylor and to stay right where I'm at. And Kentucky's going to have to go back to the drawing board and get somebody from a mid-major program like they were able to do with Calipari coming over from Memphis all those years ago. If I'm a Power 5 coach at an already established school, I wouldn't go to Kentucky because you're setting yourself up for failure. Because if you're not in the Final Four in 2 to 3 years, they're going to be ready to run you out of town. And again, Coach Calipari had a lot of success over his years there, but these past couple years, it's gone sideways. And again, it's been built on the fact that they have a roster that is routinely very young, comprised of great talent that goes on to be NBA lottery picks and stuff like that. But as we've seen, experience gets you deep runs in the NCAA tournament. And that's not what they were doing out there in Kentucky. And whoever that new coach that would come in, would they want to change up that strategy of maybe focusing less on getting high caliber talent as freshmen and maybe going out there and attacking the portal a little bit more? I don't know. But again, if I'm a Power 5 coach at already good school, I'm using it to leverage more money and staying right where I'm at as opposed to going into that, wood chipper that is Kentucky that'll chew you up and spit you out real quick. Going to talk some racing coming up next, as we do every Wednesday with Jen Jensen from the early game as the Extra Point rolls along. Tyler Head along with you here on The Game.